what do you see happening? What's in the headlines? What's happening in the politics of your country? What's happening with technology? What's happening with business? What's happening with your ability to get a job, to take care of your family? For me, it feels like everything is on fire. We have problems everywhere, and the people who are in charge are more interested in making the problems worse than making them better. And so I have to ask you, did you agree to this? Theoretically, we live in democracies, right? We're supposed to be in charge. But if you ask yourself, and you ask the people who created the world that we're in today, did the public agree to this? You'd get a lot of different answers. Lawmakers would say that it doesn't matter. The police would say that you don't have a choice. It's the law. Now, Facebook and Google and Apple and all of these other guys who control the modern internet that connects all of our lives together, they would say, actually, you did agree. You consented to this. But I don't think that's true. And I bet you don't think so either. See, the people who run the system, they pretend that we consent. They pretend we agree because of where we were born, or where we have no choice but to live, or simply because we had to click the OK button in order to use our phone when we take it out of the box for the very first time. There are these gates that are created step by step throughout our lives, these systems that are designed to control the flow of our movements, the flow of our lives, how we can interact with society. These are gates that separate where we are today from where we want to be tomorrow. And in order to pass through these gates, increasingly, you have to click that OK button. But you're not actually agreeing to it because you don't actually have a choice. If you can't use a phone, you can't contact your family, you can't contact your friends, you can't contact your place of work, you can't get a place of work. You can't interact with your bank, you can't make payments, you can't buy things online, you can't order a taxi, you can't do anything. Because first you must pass through this gate that you have to say, I'll do whatever you want, please just let me interact with society. But that's not consent, not in any way that really matters. These digital structures of control are affecting all of us. And I think that every person today is realizing that this lack of consent actually matters. Speaking quite plainly, that we matter and what we want matters, even if every day we are told by politicians and by programs that that's not true. There's nothing in the world more permanent than a temporary law. So where does this lead us? This leads us to the question of what is known about us, by whom and why. That means that we need to talk about digital security, or rather digital insecurity, that is making all of our lives vulnerable, right? We are subject to influence, we are subject to control, and this control is informed, this influence is provided by the surveillance that occurs as a result of that digital insecurity. So all of this together means that we're going to be talking about power. Why? Because the only people that are interested in big data, mass data, all of these records from all of these people, they're not interested in it simply for the sake of collecting it, right? They're not academics, they're not performing a study. They're collecting data, they're creating perfect records of private lives because of what it provides them, because of the utility that it represents. Now, whether we're talking about Facebook determining what kind of ads you see, or something more concrete, like the police deciding who gets investigated, or a military deciding who gets invaded, information is simply a convenient means, a mechanism for attaining a certain kind of power, and that power is control. Now, typically in a democracy, control over the general outline of society is intended to be exercised by us, by the people broadly, with their will imposed upon all of the powerful institutions that generations of our families have constructed, created, put together. Whether those institutions are the police with powers of detention and arrest, imprisonment, or even killing, military and spy agencies, or even corporations, businesses. We create regulations and structures, outlines and rules that are supposed to say what they can and can't do, create rules of fair play. But when we look at today, when you look around at that world and you go, did you agree to this? I think you will recognize that we have stumbled upon a problem. And that's that the people are no longer in control. Particularly when it comes to surveillance. Surveillance technologies have outpaced the traditional democratic means of controlling them. A generation ago, there were limitations on the way this could be used, even by the most aggressive of governments, because surveillance was difficult, it was costly, it was expensive. I worked for the CIA, I worked for the NSA, I know how this has changed. Government previously had to spend huge sums of money to track just particular sets of individuals, a handful of people. To know somebody's location might involve many different teams of surveillance officers, both in buildings and out on the streets, that are working in shifts. Today, that dynamic has reversed. You can have one guy sitting behind a desk in a building, and he can track huge numbers of people. And the computer just updates them on, oh, this person turned on their phone at this location. There's another phone in the same location that's traveled from this part of the city to that part of the city to that part of the city. We know they are what we call co-travelers. They know when you log into Facebook. They know when you log into Google, because Google and Facebook will provide this information to governments. And what this means is that guy behind a desk has almost a kind of omniscience. They don't know everything about you, but they know most things about most people at most times. And for the first time in human history, it is both technically and financially possible for governments, even smaller governments now, to track and store nearly complete records of all of our lives.